Hello and welcome to this session in which we introduce the SQL language. As you remember, SQL is the most popular language to work with relational databases. We typically subgroup the SQL commands to four families. The first has to do with the structure of our schema and tables. So these statements does not affect the actual data that we store in the database, but rather the structure of the database itself or the schema. The first statement is the create statement used to create a new database object. For instance, when you want to create a new database, a new schema for an application, you typically use the create and specify the name of that application. When you want to create a new table within a schema, you use the create to create that table. Alter is used to change the structure of an existing object. Say for instance that you need to add a new column to your table structure. You would use the alter statement to add this column to the table. Another example is when you need to add an index to the table. You would also use the alter command. The drop statement, as its name implies, will delete or drop a database object, a table, or a schema. It will totally drop it, so be careful when using it. Rename statement will rename the table or the column, and the truncate will erase basically all of the data in a table in one stroke. The other family of SQL statements, and mostly used, is the data manipulation language that has to do with the content itself. This is the actual data that your application generates and that you retrieve. The create statement, remind you, there is also a create statement in the data definition language family that creates new elements that are part of the structure. Here we create new records in a table. The read is not exactly a statement. We typically use the select statement to read data, but the read is the most used operation typically that we have over a database, and that is requesting for existing data that is stored in the database. And then we need, of course, also to update existing data or existing records in tables. For that we have the update, and then we have the delete to delete existing records. Of course, this family of statements is what you would expect when you work with a database, and these are the typical activities that you need to do. These four statements or operations over a database are typically referred to the CRUD operations. C for create, R for read, U for update, and D for delete. So when you read an article and you see that they're talking about the CRUD operations over a table or over a database, then you know what they're talking about. Now we have two statements that help us control access to the data itself, and that is granting permissions to users, or privileges as they're called in MySQL, and revoking privileges from users. The last family of statements has to do with the consistency of the data in our tables, and that is the commit and the rollback. This has to do with transaction control, and we will discuss transactions in more detail later in the course. Just to give you an idea, a transaction is a set of SQL statements that we would like the database to consider as a single atomic operation to be done on the database. So either all of them are successful or none of them should be carried out. The commit statement helps us tell the MySQL engine that we would like now to take the buffer of all of the issued statements in our transaction and commit them to the database at once. If anything goes wrong along the way, then we can always issue the rollback statement that takes us back to the initial point before the transaction was initiated. I hope you take a good snapshot in your mind of this slide, because this is the menu, so to speak, of statements that we will be using when we are working with SQL, and in particular in this course, of course. So they are very important, and we will meet shortly in the next session in which we start exploring those statements.